Smile, Tom. Robot, Tom.
This is what I'm going to use to pass in court when I'm on trial for crimes against humanity.
Well, that constipated look is not going to help you in court, but whatever. Hey there, internet world. Welcome to Jumpstart Live, where we'll be talking about the fourth turning in Timewave Zero. Now, some of you are watching this and you're like, I don't know what the fourth turning is. I don't know what Timewave Zero is. Start Googling, folks. You're going to be in for a wild ride. For those of you who are in the know, we're looking forward to your comments, any questions, any disagreements, any thoughts, anything at all. You can leave them in the comments below. Very happy to hear from you. Tom, I'm happy to talk to you today. How you doing?
Pretty good. I mean, some people might think that we're just doing a video on the fourth turning on Timewave Zero because we read some blog posts about being super niche on the internet gives you more views, but we're actually very interested in the subject. That other stuff is just a little bit of a bonus.
Look, all right? Look, it's probably the conversation Jeff Bezos has every day. Look, it turns out that if you give people what they want and efficiently and fast, you become the emperor of the world. I didn't want that. Just a happy byproduct. Just a happy byproduct that I am now Emperor Bezos. Tom, I remember Timewave Zero from way back in the day. I can't remember all the details. I know Terrence McKenna. I know it had something to do with a waveform that was collapsing, something like a ticking time bomb.
You're saying words. You're saying words.
Go on.
It's related to the I Ching. Do you know what the I Ching is?
Of course. But just for those who don't know, what's the I Ching, Tom?
So the I Ching is the oldest known divination tool. It's basically you throw these 3 coins down, depending on they land on heads or tails. You build out these what they call trigrams, which are made of hexagrams, basically these symbols that represent certain types of ideas and elements. But
Do we have an
that's not
image
that's
of the I
sure.
Ching? Do we have an image?
Yeah, let me pull one up. So the I Ching here, these are all 64 of the hexagrams. So you'll notice that they are mixes of lines and lines with spaces. So these represent light and dark, and there are 64 different combinations of them. And the 64 combinations of them, depending on how they show up in a trigram here. Let me trigram here. It lets you know like this. The combination of them, you look it up. You look up the information in this book, and it's a book called the Book of Changes, and it basically is a fortune telling device. So very much like what you might imagine astrology might be like. But what's interesting about the I Ching is that if I'm not mistaken, the Book of Changes, the the I Ching is, I think, the oldest book in human history. It's been around forever. And the reason it's been around forever is that it has this weird quirk. This is what people say. I haven't tried it myself. This weird quirk of being like surprisingly accurate.
Hmm.
This is not like getting your horoscope on from the morning newspaper. Uh, Politicians, world leaders, business people, folks from all walks of life have consulted the I Ching, especially in Eastern philosophy, in order to help determine what they should do at any given time. Well, what does this matter? Well, Terrence McKenna, he is, I believe he was a professor. I can't remember which university, some known university, and he fell in love with the I Ching. He's a very rational guy, and he fell in love with the I Ching, and he was like, "Why is this so surprisingly accurate and useful in daily life?" And he decided he was going to convert this binary system of these hexagrams into a computer program. I mean, there's a lot of story that leads up to that, but he decided to convert it to a computer program, and it took him about 3 years. And when he made it, he said, of all the contributions that Terrence McKenna has given the world, his talks, his points of view, his philosophy, this, he says, is the one thing he actually invented. Like, this is the one thing he says he can actually say he contributed to humankind. And basically, it translated this into the different combinations and how they uh, anyways, how they interact with each other, the different resonances, into a chart, a Cartesian chart that showed this wave. So let me just show you what the wave looks like. Let's see here if I got one. Into basically a chart like this. Can you see that there?
Yes.
All right. So you don't have to go into all the details about how this chart is generated and what it means and all that. Just understand that it's based on the binary system of the I Ching. And Terence McKenna and others found it to be surprisingly predictive. That this chart, what it's showing is that when the chart is when the line is going down, it means novelty in the human population is increasing. So complexity and creativity and newness, novelty. And when it's going up, it's going towards habit. It's going towards stability, the familiar, the nostalgic. And so Terence McKenna claims that you can pinpoint certain points on this chart. It's sort of like a roadmap for, oh, novelty will be happening in the future, or habit. Now, the reason why this is interesting, and I mean, like you said, we first saw this, I don't know, 2009, 2010, or whatever. What was interesting is that we were hearing a bunch of talk about the Mayan calendar. We're not going to go into all the details about the Mayan calendar, but you remember the Mayan calendar, that the big thing about it was that it ended in December 21st, 2012. Right?
2012, baby.
This is a calendar that was created thousands of years ago, and for some reason ended December 21st, 2012. I mean, they didn't have December on the Mayan calendar, but the different cycles ended at that period of time. And when Terence McKenna inputted this information inside of the I Ching information inside of his Timewave Zero software, it also ended in December 21st, 2012. And he was like, "Whoa, what the hell is going on over here?" And so us, doomsday preppers who are waiting for the end of the world said, "Great, December 21st, 2012, that's going to be the end of the world." Turns out it didn't end there. We can have all kinds of conversation about that in a second. But what I like about this is two things. In our conversations about the fourth turning, it's this idea that we're in a some sort of fractal system, some sort of cyclicality, that the events that occur affect the human population, and the human population then influences the events that occur. So you have this feedback loop, and that's what a fractal equation is. A fractal equation is that the answer of the equation gets fed back into the equation to generate the new answer. And when you generate that sort of thing, when you create that sort of fractal thing, you get these beautiful complex structures that have a sort of pattern to them, but which we call in fractal world self similarity. That one part looks like another. Actually, let me just pull it up here so people are not just wondering what I'm talking about. Yeah. This is the Mandelbrot set. Is the famous Benoit Mandelbrot is the one who invented the term fractals. And if we take a look at the Mandelbrot set here, all right. So this is one a graphical representation of a fractal equation, and all that's happening right now is that whole image is being zoomed in on. So this is all the same equation being fed back in on itself, and you get these beautiful fractal patterns. So there's no lines in fractal patterns; it's all curves, and you see this sort of fractal thing is very reminiscent to fractals in nature. So when you take a look at plants, these are fractal patterns. When you take a look at coastlines and seashells, these are all fractal patterns, and it sort of makes sense because uh, the plants and the animals and the coastlines are, it's a iterative process, right? The creation of part of it feeds back into the organism itself, and then it iterates the next version. So it makes sense that it's a fractal process would then generate what you would see as a fractal. And so what's interesting about this is that if the idea is, could you navigate a fractal? Right? It's super complex. I mean, until computers came about, people called this they call fractal equations a pathological equation because you could not solve it with like a pen and piece of paper. And it was only when computers came around they were able to actually have computers solve these equations, these complex equations. And so the that's what Terence McKenna found inside of his Timewave Zero software, that not only was a fractal pattern inside of the I Ching, but that the same fractal pattern kept repeating again and again and again and again throughout time. And it's weird because fractal patterns are self-similar. So basically, he said, if you took the entire system and you went for the beginning of from the Big Bang all the way to December 21st, 2012, you
Hmm.
had a fractal pattern. And then if you zoomed in at one order of magnitude, let's say, then that same fractal pattern would repeat again. But instead of going from the beginning of the universe to the end of the calendar, it would go, let's say, from the creation of the Earth all the way to December 21st, 2012. And then if you zoomed in again, it would go, let's say, from when human beings showed up on the planet to December 21st, 2012. And the same system would repeat again and again. So if we just go back to this chart over here, just to give you an idea, the second. So this idea of that this pattern, this pattern right now that we're seeing on the screen is showing, let's say, markers for the birth of or the death of Mohammed, the Islamic Golden Age, Crusade, Black Death, New World Discovery, American Revolution, and World War II. But that same pattern zoomed out on a larger time scale might match with the Jesus Christ being born. Um, uh, well, I'm not going to start naming the different events in time. I'm not going to get the analogy perfect, but that the same resonances, the same types of things are happening in the past. So, for example, World War II might resonate with what's going on right now with COVID, right?
Mhm.
So what's interesting about this isn't that, oh, is this thing very predictive? Because it does end in December 21st, 2012, and the world didn't end then. What it is descriptive of is that it would seem that the fractal pattern that we're in, that existence is a fractal pattern, and that understanding how to navigate this is what allows for us to be predictive, which makes sense. Like you think to yourself, if someone could, if you hear about shamans, let's say in ancient civilizations, who could predict what would happen in the future for their population, and you go, well, are they going into the future and seeing the future? Right? That's what a lot of people believe. Like,
They
is
are.
that what's happening?
Yeah.
And so do you go, well, this provides a far simpler and much more elegant answer. That what the shaman is doing is understanding the repeating pattern that happens throughout existence, and can say, "Oh, this is where we are in the cycle, and so this is what's liable to happen in the future." And we talked about in the fourth turning where a crisis gives birth. A crisis has heroes up to the task. The heroes, after they deal with the crisis, have a certain behavior towards their children and their elders, and this sort of perpetuates a type of generational cycle within the population. And so you can imagine a shaman who they're, let's say, the keeper of the past, the keeper of the knowledge, who have, let's say, the entire oral history of their people in mind. They can see that three 12 turnings ago that this pattern just keeps repeating again and again, and so they're like, oh, well, this is what's going to happen in the next season. Not only can they tell the weather because you could understand that pattern, but they could tell the movements of animals. They could tell what the chiefs are likely to do. Is war likely to happen? Is famine? They have this thing because they have this broader cycle in their mind. And to people who don't have that, they seem like prophets, right? And it makes sense. If you knew about seasons and the people around you didn't know about seasons, you would be able to make predictions about the future, all kinds of granular predictions about the future that people would be like, "Oh my God, you have access to the mind of God, right?" But no, it's just like, oh, you get that winter's coming. So there's things that will occur. And what this
It's
time of
much
sorry?
it's much like, well, I shouldn't say it's much like, but it makes me think of when I'm watching TV shows and there's like, 15 episodes in the season.
Right.
There's this formulaic iteration of the TV show, season one, season three. And I know at the first episode, the fifth episode, the 10th episode, and the last three episodes will move the story forward. But the sixth episode and the seventh episode will be filler episodes where nothing really happened, and I can kind of predict what's going to happen season by season where the beats are because they use this formula.
That brings me to like that's the same sort of idea in Joseph Campbell's A Hero's Journey, right? This idea that um, there's this pattern that we normally see heroes go through inside of a movie that we watch or a show that we watch. First they we see them in their normal everyday life. Then something occurs, right? An opportunity occurs that allows them to either embark on an adventure or not. They decide to embark on an adventure. They think they're going to do something. Then it turns out that the adventure is actually something different. There's something bigger that they need to do. Then they have some difficulties. There's a major setback where it's a point of it's a major point of no return, where after this point they can go back to where it was before. Maybe a friend dies, maybe their city burns down or whatever. There are even harder complications. There's a major setback where they think they can never succeed. The hero has to give up who they what they were clinging to in the past in order to claim a power in the future to be able to then go defeat the villain and create the new world. This pattern repeats again and again in stories, in all kinds of stories. And when that pattern, when we're watching something and the hero does something that's different than that, like significantly different than that, it's discordant in the same way that a song that doesn't have a refrain or something, like it's missing something, it doesn't ring true. And so in the fourth turning, and in the Timewave Zero and in the I Ching, the idea is that time is not this flat surface, right? Time is not this flat surface. When we in our Western world, we see space as volatile, as a fractal, as rough. That there's mountains and valleys and deserts and rivers. We understand that, and so when we see a ball roll down a hill and gain speed and go faster and faster, we're not surprised by that. We go, well, of course, that's what happens at this point in space. But what these divination tools and fourth turning and all that is telling us is that there's a topography to time, and that certain behaviors are more depending on what time you do it at, you'll be more prone to succeed or not. So if you're descending into novelty, that's the time, let's say, to try to rally a population to take on big challenges. But when you're going towards habit, well, you're not going to be heard. No one's gonna listen to you because there's hills and valleys and rivers and plains in time.
I have restless leg syndrome. Anybody who has this knows how torturous it can be. It took me, only recently did I find out, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, that restless leg syndrome appears to be tied to your circadian rhythm. Apparently, my circadian rhythm is out of sync with regular person's circadian rhythm, so that if I go to sleep at night, I experience severe restless leg. But if I sleep more during the day, let's say I go to bed at 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and then I sleep into the daylight, then my restless leg isn't really as problematic. I had to learn to factor in time in a way that I never really thought about it when it came to the things that I want to do, sleep in this case, in order for me to be healthy, for me to have a positive experience in life. Similarly, understanding how time affects other things, how timing affects other things, will be important when we're trying to craft and implement solutions, when we're trying to galvanize the population, when we're trying to find the words or the sentiment that we want to evoke. Timing is crucial.
Exactly. And the um, once you start internalizing that and you start seeing the world in this fractal system, you understand this sort of feedback mechanism. All of a sudden, you start seeing these timing things everywhere. You start feeling time as this topography. So you might say, "Oh, what from when I wake up in the morning to halfway through the morning, I have one level of productivity for my mind." And then from that point all the way to, let's say, lunch, I have a different one. And after that, different thoughts occur to me. I'm not as productive, but I might be more creative. So it's that I'm more creative in the third quarter of the day, and then in the last quarter of the day, it's better for me not to do anything because I'll be what do you call it, pushing a wet noodle. I'm not going to get anywhere. Better for me just to stop and pick up the next day, right? But if you don't understand, if you're not seeing that sort of cycle, then some people will not do they'll put off stuff in the morning, right? They'll put off stuff in the first quarter of the morning, and they'll try to catch up in the last quarter of the quarter of the day when they're tired or they don't have the strength. They're not getting as far, and they go, "This wasn't working." Then they're even tireder for that night, and then they miss out two quarters the next morning, and then they're trying to catch up because they're off on the cycle, right? Same thing if you're a farmer, right? Sometimes you have to sow the land. Sometimes you're tilling the land. Sometimes you're sowing the land. Sometimes you're reaping, and sometimes it has to be fallow. If you don't have a period where you're not doing anything to the land, and that's also a step. And so understanding these phases, you start seeing it everywhere in daily life. From 0 to 20, you tell kids take risks. Learn what you need to learn. Get the tools that you need to use in your second turning from 20 to 40, 20 to 40. That's where you take as much risk as you can. If you're going to take risk at all, that's where you take risk, and you try to bring something to the world. You try to make your life what it needs to be, and then after that, from 40 to 60, that's where you're not taking risk, and you're doing things that are about um, uh, leave information, legacy for the past, things for your kids. You're focused on stability, and then the fourth quarter of your life, you might be thinking about memoirs and that sort of thing as you're writing out. Right? Understand, if people were taught this, then they would behave differently in their daily life. Same thing with a company. Peter, I've been for a while. You heard me probably stop a little bit talking about adventure marketing because there was something missing in what I was talking about. The uh, I could understand my venture marketing model talks about value, transparency, and reputation as the three pillars to a given company. But there's something I was missing, and that a component was this time that the company needs to operate in multiple time frames, right? So it's different. When a company starts off, they'll just like a kid, they have to put things in place. They're putting their structure into place. After that, in their second turning, the company is taking risk in order to find out how best to offer the value, how to figure that out. In the third turning, they've settled on that. Now they're churning out that information, their product or service, whatever it is. And at the fourth turning, they're trying to make the service, the value that they're offering, either a utility or to eradicate the problem altogether, so that some new company can start off and use their stuff as a utility, as a base, or tackle some new problem. You don't want a new company to start off 100 years from now solving the same problem that a company 100 years before was tackling, right? And so that sort of cyclicality, is that sort of mentality is something that the fourth turning really like brought back to my mind and brought back all these things that I had forgotten. And it's what I want for Happy for a Change. I want us to think of it in these terms, figure out where we are in this timing, and go, oh, this is how we started off. This is how we came into the layout of the topographical layout in time, and this is the sort of things that we're more prone to do to be successful, and things that we're not, right? And see how we can help people with the company, move towards a world that we would prefer, the vision that we have.
So, how does the fourth turning, Timewave Zero, how does this affect people in their everyday life, in the macro? So, yes, on an individual basis, you've got to figure out the timing, what works for you, what works for your environment. If you want to ask your boss for a raise, maybe Monday morning is not the best day to do that. Maybe, Friday uh, at lunchtime is better to do that. Um, but when it comes to the macro, when we're looking at the big picture of the world, when we're talking about the fundamental issue, whether or not we're going to move ourselves to a golden age or to a dystopian apocalypse, how does Timewave Zero or the fourth turning help us to make a golden age more likely?
So it's useful to think of ourselves as this sort of Russian nesting dolls of systems. So there's you as an individual, right? And even then, you can break that down to your different preferences, right? There's you as you are alone, with friends, with family, with your partner, with your children, with other people. There's all kinds of different you. So, but let's just consider you as an individual.
Mhm.
Then there's you inside your family unit and your family unit and your friends. Then there's you within your civilization. Then there's you within your generation. Then there's you as a human being, as part of the population. So, the fourth one specifically says, okay, pay attention to how you've interpreted the major events, the events that you think are major, that have happened in the world. How have you interpreted them? And pay attention to it, because do not take it for granted that other generations interpret it the same way. So we saw 9/11 in a very particular way, right? So for me, I saw 9/11, it was like a wake up call. That 9/11 was the day I turned on. Like before that, I was just like futzing around. And after that, I was like, holy crap, there's a world out there, right? I mean, literally, when I saw the footage of 9/11 on the news, I thought it was a trailer for a movie. And then after that, I was like, oh, wait a second. Real life is real, and movies are emulating that. Other things are occurring. I turned on. But if you can imagine that, if you had already been in if you were a child of someone who was in World War II, you might have seen, you might have, and you knew about or lived through Pearl Harbor. All of a sudden, 9/11 was a different thing for you, right? You go, oh, I've seen this before. This is that we're leading into something else, and so you interpret that in a different way. If you were 80 years old, you go, well, I'm not going into any war right now, and I'm not in any position where I'm making laws or anything like that, but I have a different way that I might be able to interact with this. That person would have seen 9/11 in a very different way. And so I was actually someone was asking this question on Real Vision, like, the fourth turning focuses on America. How do I find? Has anyone done that sort of study for my country, for whatever country that they're in? And what I wanted to tell them is that you have to look at yourself and pay attention to the events that shaped you, and then what you'll notice is that the problems that you see in the world, the problems that you see around you, you'll only see the problems that you resonate with, that you can actually contribute something to, right? So, for example, I care more about the state of the financial system than I care about global warming. I'm not saying that global warming's not, or climate change is not a problem. I'm saying I don't feel compelled to tackle that problem, right? And so I would be going against the stream to try to tackle that problem. Whereas where we're talking about now, we're talking about finance and time and personal development. That to me is more my jam. And so that's how the fourth turn is practical in your daily life. To take account of your life. What has affected me? What do other people in other generations think about it? And then tackle the problems that you see. And the thing is, especially for, anyways, the problems need people. Things need doing, and so you will feel compelled to do these things. And you got to know that because you're compelled to do it, that chances are you have something of value to bring to it. And so don't be scared, because the problem needs to be solved by somebody.
And you're alive during this time, which might mean something significant for you. Um, Timewave Zero and the I Ching. Was there something more you wanted to touch upon when it came to, Terence McKenna's time wave? So his graph sort of mapped out potentially what it appeared to demonstrate were major pivot points in history where novelty increased, where there was a lot of change, where there was a dramatic change that occurred. That's the dips that we were seeing over here.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say about that is that I know we have to leave soon. the idea here is that, to me, it's not a coincidence that it ends in December 21st, 2012, right? It ends right in the fourth turning. It ends right in the fourth turning, right? Right after the crisis. It ends
Wait, 2012 is the fourth turning?
yeah, 2012. The Our fourth turning started with the financial collapse in 2008.
I see. Yes.
And
Okay.
so, to me, it's not for nothing that it stops there. Not for nothing that what we see, and we're not going to talk about that in this video, but we will in the future. The singularity, right?
I was gonna mention
Mckenna
that,
talks
yeah.
about this. Yeah, this idea that perhaps the reason why this is what I posit. Perhaps the reason why the Mayan calendar ends at 2012 and Timewave Zero ends in 2012 and that sort of thing is that maybe novelty reaches such a fervor that we move from a regular regular rate of change to an exponential rate of change. And when you're in an exponential rate of change, you can't have an exponential chart with a non-exponential chart. The chart's broken, right? It's like if you want to see the chart of Tesla, it's like hockey stick. And so before a certain point, you have to look at it, the chart, the information one way, and after you have to change it to a logarithmic chart in order to actually be able to read the pattern. Otherwise, it looks like a straight line up, literally a hockey stick. And that to me is like, okay, we're in an exponential age right now. There's a convergence of so much novelty that the calendars of the past couldn't plot out what would happen. That we could only plot it as of now in a logarithmic sense. So actually, I'm planning on working with somebody who's actually recreated the Timewave Zero software to see if we can recreate it in a logarithmic form. Because everyone goes, how are we supposed to? This doesn't work anymore after 2012. Well, we might, maybe logarithmically it will.
We have 4 minutes left. Intransigent minority.
Yeah, we don't have time to talk about that.
All right, so we'll save that for the next one. Maybe I've heard rumors about Bitcoin entering a super cycle, the last cycle. Some people claim, I've heard Willie Woo say this, that it's possible that Bitcoin is going to be exiting its typical cycle that we've observed for the past, since 2009. And that Bitcoin will no longer be going down, but will appear to go straight up and to the right. Maybe that
So
coincides with the fourth
I'll
turning.
say this quickly. So the idea is that that fractal pattern I was talking to you about, the Timewave Zero, was saying that same pattern keeps repeating itself in smaller and smaller and smaller time frames. Okay, but when it repeats itself in a smaller time frame, it's still within the larger time frame, right? We're still in the general fractal pattern from the beginning of the universe to the end, but then it keeps repeating itself again and again and again and increasing in its intensity to the point where in the last days, let's say the last 5 days of 2012, the last 5 days before the end of the calendar, December 21st, 2012, that all of the change of the universe is being compacted within those 5 days. And then within the last 3 days, all that again is being compacted again. And then within the last day, again and again, and within the last minute again, until you get to the singularity point. So the question I have is that if it took, and I know I'm being idealistic here, if it took from the beginning of the universe till December 21st, 2012, in order to get to an exponential age, it shouldn't take long to get to an exponential age, because that's happening within the smaller time frame. And so when I look at what happened between 2012 and now and today, you go, wow, that was a lot of life that happened over the last few years. Like, that's pretty. The last 10 years has been intense, my brother, intense. And now it seems that within the last 2 years, it's been even more intense, right? More things has happened, even within the COVID crisis. More technology, more incredible things have happened while people can't even move around. And then what's going to happen within the next year, right? What's this weird exponential age? So maybe Bitcoin exploding is a symptom of like exploding out of that cycle might be a symptom of that, but who knows?
From what I understand, this Timewave Zero chart, it gets, as it gets narrower and narrower and tighter, what that means is that the rate of change has increased and there's more novelty that's happening and it's being compressed in shorter and shorter amounts of time. Anybody who's paying attention, and you're probably not paying attention closely enough, I am, and there's still so much more. The amount of change and novelty that's being developed in the past few years is mind numbing. It's an explosion of novelty. So when you're the fish in the water, it's very hard to know that you're in water. And when you're in the spirit of this rate of change, it might be difficult for us to register that things are changing very quickly. But pay attention, things are changing very quickly. We're going to be talking about this, including the singularity and intransigent minority, in the next installment of Just Start, the fourth turning. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Peter Hartman.
I'm Tom Hartman.
And you're watching Jumpstart Live. Remember to check us out on Telegram and Discord. You can find our links down below, and check us out on patreon.com/happyforachange if you want to support what we're doing. Take care for now.